In the 1980s, former Israeli soldier Yossi Ginsberg traveled to Bolivia with the dream of exploring the Amazon rainforest. Upon arriving in the country, he takes a boat to the La Paz region, when another traveler, Professor Marcus Stam, shows up late at the port. Yossi asks the boatman to come back and Marcus thanks him for his help, and the two soon become great friends. As soon as they arrive in La Paz, they stay in a hostel, where they meet another of the professor's friends, the American photographer and explorer Kevin Gale. The three decide to travel together and learn more about the country and Bolivian culture. However, the next day, Yossi goes for a walk around the city when he is approached by a mysterious man who introduces himself as an explorer called Carl. He realizes that the young man is a foreigner and proposes a trip to the heart of the Amazon, where an indigenous tribe known as the Toromones live. Yossi is excited by the idea and calls Marcus and Kevin to meet the explorer, but they don't believe that this tribe really exists. However, during the meeting, Carl assures them that the Indians' territory has not yet been explored and this discovery could make them rich and famous. Kevin and Marcus are still unsure, but at Yossi's insistence, the three of them agree to go on this adventure. Before leaving, the three of them buy travel equipment, including a bottle of medicine for emergencies. Finally, they are forced to leave their watches, wallets and documents at the lodge. Until the next morning, they take a plane to the jungle. Once there, the four travelers enter the forest, with Carl telling them stories about the tribe and the dangers of nature. When night falls, the group goes to rest, but Marcus wakes up in despair, saying that some animal has attacked him. However, Carl soon realizes that it was a harmless butterfly and tells everyone to enjoy the night and get as much rest as possible. The next day, everyone makes fun of Marcus because of the butterfly incident, but this moment of distraction is soon interrupted by heavy rain. By nightfall, everyone's clothes are soaked and they have to leave them on the fire to dry. Fortunately, Carl seems to have a good knowledge of survival tactics in the forest and helps the group settle into this inhospitable environment. Despite this, Marcus doesn't seem to be enjoying the trip at all and complains about everything during the hours of walking. This makes the atmosphere between the friends increasingly uncomfortable and everything only gets worse when Carl disappears in the middle of the forest. Marcus believes that he has abandoned them and the three of them start arguing, when suddenly they hear something moving in the middle of the woods. Believing it to be a wild animal, they are about to flee, but it is soon revealed that it was only a native, leading his cow back to the village. The guy then shows the trio the way and they finally meet Carl, who is waiting in front of the village of Asariamas. The group is welcomed by the locals, who soon introduce them to their culture and customs, as well as showing them their typical food and drink. The next morning, Yossi, Marcus and Kevin say goodbye to the village and follow Carl into the jungle, their energy renewed thanks to this experience. Along the way, they see a monkey jumping through the branches, and the explorer quickly takes out his gun and shoots it. The animal, however, has not been eliminated and the man decides to finish off the poor animal by stabbing it. This aggression bothers Marcus, who asks why Carl didn't shoot again to put the animal out of its misery. The man then replies that in the jungle, you can't afford to waste bullets. In the evening, Carl prepares a meal with the monkey and convinces everyone to eat, saying that the taste of his meat is unique. Kevin and Yossi follow the advice and realize that the explorer was right, but Marcus refuses to eat. This attitude annoys his friends, who begin to think that bringing him on this trip was not a good idea. Things only get worse when his feet are hurt by the humidity in the forest, forcing him to walk more slowly. On seeing his wounds, Carl realizes that they are more serious than he thought and that they will have to be taken back to the village. Yossi and Kevin suggest reducing the load and carrying Marcus, but the explorer replies that they will be exhausted by the effort and will be easy prey for wild animals. The whole situation makes Yossi angry and he tells them that he doesn't want to go back, after they've traveled the whole way. In the middle of this impasse, Kevin says it's better to build a raft and cross the jungle by river, being able to go through the forest and return to the point closest to the airport. If all goes well, they will have the chance to pass through the Toromones tribe and take Marcus safely back to the city. Carl isn't too sure about this, but ends up agreeing to the plan, and so the four of them start collecting tree trunks to build a raft. Hours later, they finish the job and build a sturdy raft, along with 4 more oars and a rudder. With everything ready, they set off across the river, but Marcus notices that Carl is more nervous than usual. In the first part of the journey, the river is calm and the group manages to cross it without any problems, until they see several rocks ahead. At the same time, the water begins to move the raft more forcefully and the group tries to hold on using the oars, but to no avail. Yossi tries to stabilize the navigation using the rudder, but the force of the water makes him let go and the group can't keep control of the raft. Carl tries to guide them, but he's so nervous that he ends up giving the wrong directions, which only makes the whole group more confused. The raft narrowly misses, crashing into the rocks, and Kevin begins to suspect that the explorer has no idea what he's doing. Despite the setbacks, the group finds the riverbank and manages to get the raft there safely. Everyone is fine, but Kevin confronts Carl about his nervousness and for almost risking everyone's lives. The guy retorts, saying that it was his idea to go through the river and that it would have been better to follow his advice to return to the village on foot. Finally, the explorer warns them that they will have to trust him and leaves to look for food. However, Kevin isn't convinced and suspects that Carl's nervousness is a sign that he can't swim. This only makes everyone suspicious about the real identity of this explorer, and Yossi decides to go after Carl to find out the truth. As he enters the forest, he calls out for the explorer, but is startled to hear the sound of gunfire coming towards him. Luckily, the young man manages to duck just in time, and when he looks ahead, he finds Carl pointing his rifle in his direction. The explorer says he shot a jaguar that was approaching the young man and goes after the predator, making Yossi even more suspicious about Carl's intentions. Hours later, the explorer returns from the hunt and Kevin tells him that he has prepared everything for them to continue their journey along the river. However, Carl refuses, saying that he prefers to walk to the nearest village. And from now on, they can continue on their own if they want to. Upon hearing this, Kevin and Yossi meet to decide what to do, especially regarding Marcus and his injuries. Kevin says that the best thing to do is to try their luck in the river, together with Yossi, and let Marcus go with Carl, as it will be a safer route. Yossi doesn't think it's a good idea to leave his friend and decides to talk to Marcus to make a decision. At first, Marcus wants to follow Yossi and Kevin on the raft. However, due to his injuries, he thinks it best to stay with Carl and return to the village, as it will only take them 3 days to travel. The two agree with this decision and call Carl to go over the whole plan. The explorer agrees to accompany Marcus and warns Kevin to take the right side of the river, otherwise they will reach a huge canyon and have no way of escaping the current. With everything explained, Carl settles his differences with Kevin and wishes him good luck, as well as giving him his machete to help them. Finally, Marcus says goodbye to his friends and Yossi promises that when the two of them meet up, they'll have a celebratory dinner and enjoy the rest of their trip away from the jungle. Marcus is satisfied with this and says goodbye to his friends, who, after preparing the raft, set off on it towards the river. Despite a few problems, the two manage to get through the journey without too much trouble and hope that Marcus and Carl are okay. At one point, Kevin lets Yossi rest for a while and takes control of the raft. However, he ends up seeing the canyon too late, and within a few seconds, the current begins to pull them much harder. Kevin tells Yossi to wake up and help him keep control of the raft, but the river is getting more and more aggressive and his efforts are futile. Unable to reach the shore, Kevin and Yossi use all their strength to steer the raft towards a rock in the middle of the river. The impact causes the boat to rise and the two friends manage to hold on, but it's only a matter of time before the current pulls them in. Kevin then has the idea of swimming to the nearest shore, and when he gets there, Yossi has to throw the machete so that he can cut down a vine. With this, Kevin can use it as a rope and pull his friend safely out of the water. Yossi is very nervous and doesn't want Kevin to leave him now, but he promises to come back and pull him out with the vine. Kevin then jumps into the water, and despite the fierce current, he manages to reach the shore. Now it's Yossi's turn to throw the machete, but as he tries to do so, the raft comes loose from the rock and he is pushed hard into the river. The young man tries to hold on to something, but the current knocks him into the rocks and one of them hits him on the head. Despite the injury, Yossi manages to regain consciousness quickly, and when he finds a shallower part, he manages to swim there and reaches dry land. Now completely alone and not knowing his location, Yossi shouts for Kevin, but can't find his friend anywhere. He then climbs a hill to get a better view of the landscape, but there is nothing around and Yossi is without his equipment. As night falls, the young man tries to brave the cold and rain, hoping that a predator won't find him. Luckily, the night passes without any major incidents, and at first light, Yossi goes out to look for Kevin. Again, there is no sign of him anywhere, but Yossi hears the sound of pots banging nearby. On his way back to the river, he finds one of the backpacks floating in the water and jumps in to get it back. Unfortunately, there is no food or water, but he finds the bottle with the medicine and some travel equipment. Yossi takes one of the pills to gain more energy and sets off through the forest in search of Kevin. Hours go by, and despite all his efforts, Yossi finds no one in the dense forest and neither does the rest of the equipment. The young man is unhappy with the situation and sits down in front of the river, where he asks himself if this adventure was really a good idea. However, this is not the time to think about that and his only hope is to move on, using the equipment he has left. So, Yossi takes the map from his backpack, and locating where he is in the forest, the young man draws a picture and puts it in his jacket. Finally, he leaves the drawing and his jacket on the rock, hoping that Kevin will find it and be able to track him down. On his 6th day in the forest, Yossi finds fruit on the branch of a huge tree and starts to climb it, when he comes across a poisonous snake inside the trunk. The fright makes him jump out of the tree, but he realizes that now he has to do everything in his power to survive. Gathering all his courage, he climbs back up, removes the snake with his bare hands and eliminates it with several blows with a rock. He then takes the fruit and the snake to feed himself, and continues his journey following the route described on the map. It shows that the nearest village is called Kiriplaya, and Yossi continues walking, as this is his only hope of getting help. At dusk, the young man sets up a makeshift bed using the leaves of the trees and tries to sleep, with a flashlight always at hand. Suddenly, he hears the sound of a roar, and when he looks to the side, he sees a jaguar slowly approaching. Even though he was unarmed, Yossi took some spray he had found in his backpack and lit a lighter, pointing it in the direction of the jaguar. With the predator preparing to attack, the young man squeezes the spray, creating a small jet of fire, which is enough to scare the predator away. When the day dawns, Yossi is still alive, but he notices that the bump on his head, caused by the blow he took in the river, is moving. So, using a pair of tweezers, he manages to remove a parasite that had entered his body. Once the bleeding had stopped, Yossi continued walking until he found a nest with 2 eggs. Hungry, he is forced to open the egg and feed on the baby bird, which has yet to hatch. To make matters worse, as soon as he arrives in Kiriplaya, the place has already been abandoned by the locals for a few days. As a result, he will have to travel an even longer way to Rurenabak, the next village. But first he needs to build a fire and tend to his wounds. Like Marcus, Yossi discovers that his feet are badly hurt when he takes off his shoes and socks. He then apologizes to his friend for not being more understanding with him, and says he did it because he didn't want to appear weak in front of the others. Another day passes and Yossi continues to walk through the forest, when he finds a footprint in the mud. He hopes it's Kevin's, but when he looks at the broken eggs on the ground, he realizes that the footprints are his own, walking in circles. This makes Yossi lose hope, but he remembers Carl's advice to guide himself along the right side of the river. So, with what strength he has left, the young man sets off, using the river to find his way, facing hunger and a heavy rainstorm. Meanwhile, a resident of the village of Rurenabak and his son find Kevin asleep by the lake. They take him to the village, where the young man asks the police captain to help him look for Yossi, as he has faith that he is still alive. The captain authorizes a search by plane, but due to the dense forest, they can't fly any lower, which makes it impossible to locate anyone. Just then, Yossi hears the sound of the plane's engine and shouts for someone to help him, but it's no use. 3 weeks have passed since the start of the journey and the police captain fears that there is no hope of finding Yossi alive. Kevin doesn't accept this and says he'll search for him on his own, but in view of his persistence, the captain indicates an experienced boatman from the village who can help him. Kevin goes after him, but the guy refuses to help because there's no way anyone could survive that long in the middle of the jungle. But Kevin is determined and offers the boatman as much money as he needs to take him across the river and rescue Yossi. Meanwhile, the young man is running out of steam and lies down in the middle of the forest, not knowing what to do. Then, suddenly, he hears the voice of a young girl crying and finds a frightened native girl lost in the middle of the forest. She is startled to see the stranger and tries to hide, but Yossi tells her he won't hurt her and asks for her help. As expected, neither of them understands each other's language, but Yossi does his best to calm the young woman down. Little by little, Yossi wins her trust and promises to protect her until they find the village of Rurenabak. Over the course of the days, he tries to convince the girl to feed herself and calls her to sleep together so that they can keep warm at night. However, when he wakes up, Yossi realizes that he has been alone all this time and the young native girl was just a figment of his imagination. This only makes the young man even more desperate, believing that he is losing his sanity and will be lost in the forest forever. His hallucinations only get worse the next morning, when he starts to see people around him, congratulating him on having escaped into the forest. Because of this, Yossi ends up getting distracted for a moment and falls straight into the quicksand, where he begins to sink rapidly. Yossi tries his best to hold on to something, but every movement only makes him sink deeper and deeper. He is forced to let go of the equipment and sees in the sand an old notebook, which he kept with him as a memento of his grandfather, a war hero. He tries to reach the notebook, but all the effort makes him tire quickly and he loses consciousness. Hours later, Yossi wakes up, and by some miracle, he's still alive and hasn't sunk into the quicksand. In addition, he finds a plant branch, and by holding onto it, the young man manages to pull himself out of the trap, leaving the equipment behind. On the verge of exhaustion, Yossi sees a plant in front of him, infested with fire ants. This species is known for having an extremely painful sting. Even so, Yossi holds the plant in his hands and starts swinging it, causing the ants to fall on him. In a few seconds, he is stung by all of them, and the pain and burning spread throughout his body. Although it seems crazy, Yossi did this so that his body would be revived and he would have the strength to carry on in this fight for survival. The plan works and the young man runs until he reaches the riverbank, where he starts collecting tree trunks and assembles the shape of the letter Y with this. He hopes that the plane will spot him next time and he can finally be rescued before it's too late. In the course of the night, he comes across a turtle and at first grabs a rock to feed on it, but soon gives up and spares its life. He then looks up into the sky and sees several stars illuminating the place, creating a scene of beauty he had never seen before. Despite all the pain and suffering, Yossi opens his arms in front of this beautiful landscape, thankful that he is still alive. Finally, almost a month after arriving in the forest, Kevin and the boatman reach the shore, but there is no sign of Yossi. The guy regrets that they couldn't find him and tries to comfort Kevin, saying that he did everything he could to save his friend. The two then prepare to return and Kevin accidentally steps on one of the logs, which form the letter Y at the same moment. Yossi wakes up, hearing the sound of the boat, and when he sees Kevin, he tries to shout for help, but he doesn't have the strength. With great difficulty, Yossi gets up, believing that his only chance of survival has been lost forever. Fortunately, before crossing the river, Kevin looks over and sees his friend, completely weak, standing on the bank. He quickly sends the boatman back and rescues Yossi, feeling very happy and relieved to have found him after all this time. Kevin and the boatman then put Yossi in the boat, change his clothes and take him to the village of Rurenabak to be treated by a doctor. Once there, the villagers welcome Yossi with open arms, thanks to his courage and persistence in surviving in the middle of the jungle. This extraordinary story of survival really happened, and after returning to La Paz, Kevin and Yossi searched for Carl and Marcus. Unfortunately, neither of them managed to return, and despite Kevin's efforts to search for the two for weeks, he found no trace of them. Later, it was revealed that Carl was actually a criminal wanted by Interpol, known for robbing travelers and taking them on dangerous journeys. Along with this, his story of the Indian tribe was false, and unfortunately it is likely that Marcus, like the criminal, met a tragic fate. As for Kevin, he wrote books about his rescue attempts and moved to Israel. Yossi, on the other hand, continued to travel the world and set up a colony in the Amazon rainforest, helping the natives to settle in the same place where he fought for his survival as a youth. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.